This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get it on. No choice but get on mandate. Get it on. And welcome to the best hour in the universe. And I want to thank our sponsors, netsuite.com/doubt, ZipRecruiter.com/doubt, and TommyJohn.com/Adam. Throw a curveball at you. I'm sequestered in my home theater. Where are you, Mark?
I'm an essential business, and I braved Mayor Garcetti's wear a mask, we're going to shut the water and power off edicts to be at the office today since I'm essential. Do you know I'm essential? I've been deemed essential.
I never thought of you that way, but it's like ask the son of the major league all-star if he thinks of him as a major league all-star or just dad. No, the answer is just dad. So that's the way I think you.
It's interesting.
Yes.
The only reason I'm essential is because I still do criminal defense. And, I do a lot of civil work, but we still do criminal defense. The courts have been effectively shut down by order of the Chief Justice, who was given emergency powers by the governor, Gavin Newsom. But they still have to stay open for arraignments and preliminary hearings, which are probable cause proceedings. And arraignments because it's for bails. In fact, today we were in court for a bail proceeding, which I found fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I wish I had the document in front of me, but the DA argued that in writing that the court should not consider COVID-19 in whether or not to let the client out. And at the same time, the DA's office is slamming Jackie Lacey, who's the current DA, because she's forcing DAs to go to court in this age of COVID-19. So it's good enough to put guys in jail where they're a sitting duck pre-conviction, but the DAs don't want the judges to consider that. Isn't that wonderful?
Well, I mean, the one
as
thing
an ex-prosecutor, what do you think?
Well, look, talking out of both sides of the mouth at the same time is nothing new to anybody around here. And I got questions for you about restaurants and produce and selling backyard fruit. So many things. I do want to say to you first that you have a fan. Again, I look at you as just Uncle Mark, but Judd Apatow, famed director, writer, the prolific and the hailed
of some of the best movies ever made.
He called me the other day and started talking about you. And he
really?
said, big Mark Garrigus fan. And he had many questions. So we talked about you in glowing detail. And when we were
that
done,
was unusual for you, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Usually usually it's Armenian women pulling you aside and yelling about me.
It was, normally I have to fend off the Armenians.
Exactly.
But in this case, I just joined the Mutual Admiration Society known as Judd Apatow. So he's very interested. And at the end of the conversation, which was lengthy, I mean, it was about 45 minutes. I was
really?
circumnavigating the block. I was walking around our neighborhood. I said to him, Judd, he said something interesting, which I think you'd appreciate. After about 45 minutes, he said, I got to get off the phone. I have a 4:00 Zoom cocktail party to participate in. I said, well, that sounds good.
Right.
I said, well, Judd, if you're bored, you could come on the Adam Carolla show and just chime in, maybe next week. And he said, yeah. Well, maybe I can come on Reasonable Doubt. And then I said, or you could just come on the Adam Carolla show. And he goes, yeah. I don't really have anything to promote, but I could definitely do Reasonable Doubt. And I started feeling like chopped liver. And so about the third time I got it. So then I said, okay, well, if you want to come in on Reasonable Doubt, you can do that. And so we had a couple of texts back and forth, and we'll see if he pops in about
that would be
15
something.
minutes or so.
He's the guy who I attribute to creating, maybe not creating is too strong, promoting Jonah Hill, who's one of my favorite comedic actors of all time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, he's a genius and the nicest guy in the world, and very interested in this podcast, and very interested evidently in you, because I have a podcast that he's not interested in.
I think I've got a clue as to why. If he calls in, let me ask him one or two questions, and I think I can figure this out. I can connect some dots that go back to 2017 would be my guess.
So what's new in your world? And we'll see if Judd joins us or not. I know there's some NFL stuff going on with Eric Reid. What is that?
Boring Cop has been relentless with Eric on the NFL. Colin and I just sit back and we chuckle that the two of them are. Eric has gone from playing defense to offense. They dug up a comparison of what the NFL players actually voted on, the text of it. And then it turns out that what actually was enacted or agreed to by a very slim margin on the vote, by the way, was not what the players voted on. And it costs the disabled players real dollars. And basically it's an offset of Social Security payments against the disability payments, which is so chicken shit when you think about it. I mean, if you're an NFL player, and I know Eric and Ben did a Twitter kind of a town hall or a Twitter interview today with one of the disabled players, Hall of Famer, five-time Super Bowl. I think it was 5-time Super Bowl, maybe Pro Bowl. Gary can probably find it. I tuned in right at the end. Ben didn't bother to tell me they were doing it.
Well, 5-time Super Bowl. Is it Haley?
Who was it? Haley. Exactly. Very good. Damn. You're like the Dave Damshek of your generation. You know?
I would have made a good lawyer if anyone believed in me, right?
Trust me, you and I have been in court together. And do you remember what I told you when I turned to you? I said, damn, I've defended lawyers. I mean, for a large part of my practice, it's been defending lawyers who are in trouble, things like that. And you had better insight than virtually, and don't take this personally, anybody who's listening who I've defended, than virtually any lawyer I've ever defended. Better instincts for it.
I don't defend lawyers, but when middle-aged Armenians come at me and got a gripe with Mark Geragos, I do get in the business of defending lawyers.
You defend lawyers. So anyway, let me tell you what so for those legal nerds who are listening, this is one of the things that the Judicial Council issued a statewide emergency order, and it was done. This is as fresh as it gets for reasonable doubt. It was done within the last 72 hours. And what they did was they now said that pursuant to their constitutional authority, they've extended the time in which you must be taken in front of a magistrate once you've been arrested. So if you or I are walking around La Cañada and Garcetti, we're in violation when we were in downtown of some order, and they've issued an arrest warrant or some issue, or the sheriff decides we're violating staying home. Normally, the law says you've got to be taken in front of a magistrate within 48 hours. They've now extended that to 7 days. Now, let me explain what the problem is. This is a state court order. More than 20 years ago, in fact, I'm going to venture to say it was probably close to 30 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court in a case already ruled you can't go longer than 48 hours. They already ruled that. So somehow some genius at the Judicial Council ruled or issued an order from the state court that effectively overrules a U.S. Supreme Court decision, which came out of California, came out of Riverside County, which is mind-boggling to me. So how do you do that? And how do you say all of a sudden that you can keep somebody for 7 days without having any probable cause determination in a jail where they've already got COVID-19? Talk about a violation of the 8th Amendment. Talk about a violation of the 6th Amendment. Talk about a violation of your speedy trial rights under the 5th. And by the way, all of those things are made applicable through the 14th. So to me, it's outrageous, but I need to find a client. This is my problem. Most of my clients will bail out immediately. So I don't have a client who's going to be held in custody. Otherwise, I'd already have been into court challenging it.
Why did they do this? Is it because they're short on staff?
Well, they claim they're short on staff. I mean, they also issued an order the other day. My father's spinning in his grave. The LA County, this is one of the big issues here. You know what LA County issued? An emergency order allowing lawyers to dress in business casual at the courthouse. I mean, I thought Mayor Garcetti and the health department prohibiting restaurants from delivering groceries was bad. Right up there with, we're going to allow business casual.
Well, you tell me if there's any way you can make any sense of this at all. And then I want to double back to Eric Reid a little bit, because I do want to finish that conversation.
Maybe Gary, before we double back, Gary can find part of the interview. We'll plug it.
I've been driving around and I've been seeing folks. I drove to Malibu last weekend with Natalia just to drive around and look at some scenery. And on Temescal Canyon or one of the main canyons that go there, everything was cordoned off. There's no stopping. There's no looking at the views or everything. But at some point, I did pass a guy selling fruit. And he was just selling cut up pineapple and papaya and everything else. And when I went to the Home Depot the other day, there was another guy just set up, just illegally, I'm assuming, just selling fruit on the side of the street. Are those, I can't wrap my mind around what the cops are out in full force. They're busting everyone who's getting out of their car, going onto the beach or surfing or anything like that. What are they doing with the guys selling fruit by the side of the road?
They do nothing. They do nothing, but they have sent the health department in within the last 7 days to cite and threaten to shut down and cut water and power to restaurants that are operating as grocery stores. Mind you, that's somebody who's paying presumably rent, or if they own the building, property tax, or if they're regulated by the health department, they pay the health department fee. They pay the fees. But you're better off. The incentive here, and by the way, the mayor rescinded it yesterday when he put his black mask on and held his news conference, because he got so much grief online, not the least of which I think was from Reasonable Doubt listeners. The incentive, because this is what you do, public policy incentivizes people. Close your place, don't pay your rent, don't pay your taxes, just go get a cart. You might as well go steal one, because that's not a problem. Property crimes don't get enforced. And then just take your wares and sell it on the street and give no tax, give no sales tax, give no health department fees, give no rent, do nothing else. Just go do that. The cops will leave you alone.
Well, let me tell you, when I did an interview with Tucker Carlson a few weeks back, it struck a chord with everybody, because I said to Tucker just straight out, he said, "What's going on here?" I said, LA has taken all of its citizens and put them in one of two categories: has a checking account or is an empty bag. And if you're an empty bag, you operate with impunity. And if you have a checking account, you're overly regulated into the ground. That's simply what's going on. There's no other explanation for what's happening. All right.
There's no rational explanation for why. And I just saw it as I came up the stairs here. I looked out. There's two guys parked on 7th Street. These guys have been there. You could call the cops. They're not going to do a damn thing. I've done it. They'll do absolutely nothing. Those guys sit there with impunity, sell stuff out of there, pay nothing, do not have health department licenses, don't pay BOE, don't pay City of LA tax, do absolutely nothing. Yet, when my Range Rover, I got to start driving a Ford Fairlane. The Range Rover's parked out front, literally in a loading zone. where it's there for 3 minutes, and the security who's downstairs, who has to clean up after guys taking dumps on the street, goes out and tells the cop, points to the guy who just took the dump and says, why are you allowing this guy to take a dump in the middle of the sidewalk? They're too busy writing a ticket on the Range Rover.
Sad, but underscores my point. All right, I'm going to hit ZipRecruiter. I want to double back to Ben, boring cop, and Eric, Mr. Excitement Reid, because it'll make Ben look even more boring if Eric is Mr. Saturday Night. And the contract, so there was this much ballyhooed contract that would add a 17th game, remove one of the preseason games from the NFL season, I don't know, by coming up, maybe next season and one after, many other things. And you guys have figured out that there are things represented in the contract that the players were unaware of because they were presented with different documents than
Correct.
what is.
Well, then what they voted on. I've been talking about. It's like we'll talk on the other side.
But I want to know who discovered this and what the discrepancies were and what you guys are going to do moving forward. First, I'll tell you about ZipRecruiter. Hiring used to be hard, multiple job sites, stacks of resumes, confusing review process. Today, hiring is easy. Just go to one place, ZipRecruiter.com/doubt. That's ZipRecruiter.com/doubt. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards. Plus, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience to visit you online and apply for your job. As applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one, spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a match. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. It is the best. It is ZipRecruiter. Right, Gary?
That's right. Right now, our listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/doubt. That's ZipRecruiter.com/DOUBT. ZipRecruiter.com/doubt. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
All right, so we'll see if Judd joins us or not, but go ahead.
Okay, so look, they just handed me. They've now referred 8 businesses for criminal prosecution for failing to comply with the city's strict safer at home order. One of whom, this one I find ironic, is a smoke shop. Now, this COVID-19, by the way, is directly a respiratory virus, correct?
Yeah.
So wouldn't the last place you'd want to go during a pandemic involving a respiratory virus be the smoke shop?
Yes, that makes sense to me.
Right. So the Garcetti said, we had a smoke shop that refused to close. Even when police were there, they said, forget you, probably not in this nice words. We're not going to do it. The city is moving to shut off the smoke shop's power. Now, if that guy moved out onto the sidewalk to sell hookah, or to sell cigarettes, or
Lucy's
cigars, or Lucy's, exactly. Would they pull an Eric Garner on him? Would they tackle him? Would LAPD tackle him?
I don't know, but
They're gonna shut the power off of a smoke shop.
My point is this. Cities need to get money from people that have checking accounts, and they will look the other way for those who don't have checking accounts. I understand it, but if you go too aggressively after the ones with the checking account and you utterly ignore those that are selling food on the streets or sleeping on the streets, then the chasm gets wider. And it used to be kind of a deal, kind of a wink deal, which is, okay, taxpayers, you're going to pay for everything, and we'll sort of keep the guys from selling hot dogs on the grounds of the Staples Center, and we'll keep the homeless from stacking up like cordwood underneath the overpasses. But that deal, that tacit agreement has been thrown out, and now,
by the way, as he's threatening to shut off the power at smoke shops, I just drove down the street 4 blocks from here, and there are people crowded onto Main, Spring, and 5th and 6th, as tight as you would ever want to see. And they're all presumably shelterless. Why isn't he sending the police in there to go give them emergency shelter? Why isn't he using some of the, I've got a 70-story hotel across the street that's vacant, that's closed down. Why don't you go house them at the hotel?
Oh, these are all good questions. The great Judd Apatow is now joining us. Judd and I just spoke. It was very serendipitous. Good to speak to you, Judd.
Good to be here. Is this video or just audio? Because I'm not coiffed for you guys.
It's video.
Well, yeah, it's video.
Oh, no.
But by the way, you're looking at two guys who are less than coiffed right now.
Yeah, these are my people.
Congratulations on your crown molding. It's quite an achievement.
And I got to decide, like, what is the best background now?
It's good. It's just as we'd expect. I told Mark you were a big fan of his. And
yes, I'm a huge fan of Judd.
So why don't you guys
but
just
Judd,
go ahead
I have a question. I have
yes, sir.
Correct. Tell me if my memory is correct. Weren't you at an ACLU Bill of Rights dinner?
Of course,
When my client was the surprise guest and got an award, weren't you there?
Colin Kapernick.
Exactly.
I was, and I had to go. I had to follow him.
I was going to tell that story because why don't you tell it? You can tell it better since you were the one who had to live it.
Well, in comedy, sometimes you got to follow weird people. Like once, I remember I was in the comedy show, I had to follow Ray Romano and then Dice. I was like, well, that's a tough combo. And that night I had to, I guess, I forgot, I was getting an award.
You were getting an award, I remember.
Yeah, but after Colin Kaepernick came out, it was the biggest ovation I've ever heard.
Ever.
In my life.
I know. And by the way, it was like Jane Fonda. It was you named the icons, they were there, including you. And then I felt so bad for you because you had to come up, because it was a surprise. It was like nobody knew it was happening. And then here's Judd Apatow. And it was like, right?
And then it's like, who cares about this guy? I got some good laughs on calling out the complete lack of interest in me.
You brought the house down. It was some of your best material.
I always get big laughs pointing out that no one really cared about me. But his speech was so inspirational, and the energy in the room was very moving. And I stayed in touch with him after that. And he's such a good person. He really restores your faith in everything when you connect with him. And I feel like what we're seeing in the culture so much is that everybody is willing to sell out for money. Everyone is corrupt. When you look at, what happened with the NBA in China, where every single person was like, no, we're cool with everything that China's doing, because no one will risk a penny on any of their money and their shoe deals and all that comes with it. And that's what I was shocked by, that in the NBA, there wasn't one person who was like, I'm worried about those million Muslims in prison camps. I'm worried about it, and I think I should be allowed to say that. And not one person will say it.
Well, Adam knows.
I want to say, to be fair to Steve Kerr, he's still doing his research. So he's doing his due diligence because the jury's not in on China just yet, Steve. We're waiting for the jury to come in, and then we'll decide. Measured. It'll be very measured and very responsible when he gives his response.
Yes. Well, people are literally getting pulled out of their homes in the middle of the night and disappearing from families. But I think it's very similar to the Senate. You say, aren't there any Republican senators who are just like, fuck this. This is not being handled correctly. There's no rage. It's like they love that job so much. How good can that job be that there is literally nothing that will make you stand up for anything?
It's astonishing to me that at a certain point, and you're there for 6 years. I mean, the whole idea of the Senate was that it was designed by the founders so that you would not be, emasculated by the vicissitudes of whatever goes on. Yet it was Romney, and that was it. That was it, the one guy you decided to stand up. And then it becomes, oh, it's just partisan. It's Democrat versus Republican, end of day. That's the end of the story.
Judd, I want to talk about you in China because you're a big-time filmmaker, and Hollywood, as well as the NBA, is all having to sort of make adjustments for China because it's such a massive market. You know, you're not doing the next Batman movie, but you do big-time movies. Have you had to make alterations and adjustments?
Luckily, the Chinese are not into pothead Jew movies.
That's the best answer I've heard all week.
That's not the target constituency.
Yes. If those movies made $1 billion in China, maybe I too would sell my soul. But I can't say that that's where my money comes from, the Chinese market. But I would hope that I would speak as honestly as I am, regardless, because I do think what we're learning as we watch how the world works and how corruption works, that what we thought was that we were going to trade with China and then they would want to act like us and we would draw them out. But what happened is we get so much money from them that they basically have said, we're not going to give you this money if you don't shut up. And we are shutting up. That's what's happening.
Which is awful, which is absolutely awful. And circling back, I just want to put a pin in this one thing. When you talk about Colin, because I've said this to Adam numerous times, I don't think people realize, and you've experienced it, Judd, you get it, what a genuinely good human he is, and how devoted he is to trying to do the right thing. I mean, it's an incredible. I say it all the time. People give me all kinds of crap on the right, but he really is a genuinely good human.
Oh, you can tell it instantly, and it's almost. I mean, I know this sounds maybe over the top, but it has almost a religious feel to it, which is he just in his gut was like, I don't know, I'm uncomfortable with violence against all these people, and I think it's okay to point it out, even if it bothers some people, and then everyone else is like, well, now we have to crush you.
Right.
I have two thoughts. One is anyone who's listening to this in China, you guys should aspire to revering pothead Jew movies, because that's how you know your culture's out of problems. When you can go watch a pothead Jew movie and not have any other concerns in life on a Saturday night, that's evolution, number one. So aspire to that. Number two, Scott Peterson, Garrigus, explain to Judd Apatow why he should feel that Scott Peterson is actually innocent of the crimes he now sits in jail for.
Let me tell you what I remember at the time. Judd, I was in practice with my father for maybe 20 years. And when I was growing up, I tell the joke, first 13 years of my life, he was a DA. And I thought my first name was dumb and my middle name was shit, because that was how he treated me. But I went into practice with him. And I remember at the time when I talked with the Petersons and they wanted to hire me, everybody was telling me it's a lose-lose. You win the case, you're a pariah. You lose the case, your career is over. And I asked the old man about it, and he says, "This is what you do. If you're not going to do this, if you're going to shy away from taking a case because you're worried about your personal preferences, then you should go sell oranges on the side of the freeway." So I did that case, and I have jokingly said, actually, it's all true, that loss has caused more alcohol therapy than I have ever wanted. But for people who didn't follow the case at the time, and it's been almost 20 years, I sat there every day. I know the evidence better than anybody, and I will tell you that it was an injustice. And, until I laughingly tell Adam, who would have ever thought 20 years ago that Michael Jackson would now be thought of, there'd be a documentary where he's thought of as a guilty guy, and there's a documentary where Scott Peterson is now thought of as an innocent guy. So I guess if you wait long enough, the pendulum swings.
What is that documentary? I'm unaware of it.
There's one that A&E did. It was a 6-part documentary, and it really kind of changed a lot of people's minds. I think it was A&E.
What was some of the beats of that case involved the boat, the body on the boat, inspecting the boat, the jurors inspecting the boat, a triangulation with cell phone companies, and things
Correct.
of that nature. You want to hit a
And
couple
I'm
of
telling
those?
you, the interesting thing about it was that was the first time that mitochondrial DNA was ever used in California. So we had to have a hearing on that. They tried to use dog scent evidence and get that in. The judge allowed some of that in, but not all of it. There was also, and I think the A&E title was The Murder of Lacey Peterson. There was also the triangulation. It was one of the first cases where they used cell phone tower stuff. And so it was a largely, in fact, entirely circumstantial evidence case. The problem was that as I saw it, that there was no.
Oh, he just dropped off. Oh wait,
well,
sorry.
no, I'm here. Yeah,
sorry,
somebody else calling. There was no way to try that case at the time in that kind of fever pitch environment and be able to get a fair trial, which I was trying the case to just get a hung jury, figuring that by the time we got around to retrying it, we'd have a way to go. Unfortunately, the judge, after 7 days or 8 days of deliberations, removed not only the foreperson, but 2 other jurors who were hanging the case, and then he got convicted. It's now sitting fully briefed in front of the California Supreme Court, waiting for an oral argument date. But I just saw where the U.S. Supreme Court canceled all oral arguments because of coronavirus. God knows these Cal Supremes will probably do the same.
Is there a chance of parole for him?
No, not unless he gets the either the guilt has to be reversed or the special circumstances has to be reversed. Right now in California, there's a moratorium that Governor Newsom issued on capital punishment. So as of right now, he's facing life without parole.
Judd, any questions?
Well, I'm always just fascinated by the lawyers who come on television. I guess like the one example is like
Nancy
it like Marty Singer or something, who like goes on TV and it's like the women are lying, all the Cosby accusers, all 60 of them are lying. And what that line is for a lawyer to say, my client says they're lying, or when they say it.
Well, Marty famously in a court of appeals case was sued, and then I won't get into all of the rigmarole of it, but the court of appeal, I believe, in the Cosby case, ruled that his statements could be imputed to Cosby, and that could be, on top of it, liability for Cosby, and that Cosby could be sued for defamation based on Marty's statements, which is, a rather frightening thing if you're a lawyer or a client. I mean, that's a scary, scary situation to be in. But we've entered a whole new era in terms of that. It used to be that the lawyers first were muzzled, now aren't muzzled. Now you can violate. I mean, it gets into a kind of a gray area for lawyers. If it's a criminal case, the U.S. Supreme Court has said you can respond. That when the prosecutors, one of my big beefs has always been when the prosecutor comes out, does a press conference, says the guy's guilty, there's usually a desk of evidence or something. Here's the FBI. I want to thank the FBI. I want to thank, the head of the office, blah, blah, blah. We found our man. We've solved the case. Yeah, he's presumed innocent. And then they run in and they want to get a gag order right after that so the defense can't say anything. That is irksome to me because the gag order will go and apply to the lawyers, but won't apply to law enforcement. And that's a real problem.
What about the semantics of stating it like as the opinion of the lawyer as opposed to what the client is claiming? Like, is it weird for, Weinstein's lawyer to say in her own voice, all these people are lying, versus my client claims that?
Yeah, and that's one of the things you have to be careful of. When you're referring to Donna Rotana, when she was representing Harvey in New York, that the judge she got crossways with the judge, and then again she wrote an op-ed piece imploring the jurors to do the right thing or whatever.
Yeah.
That, there's various lines you got to be very careful, and it requires a mental calculus that sometimes gets clouded by the heat of the battle. But what you've described is what the legal term is called vouching, where you personally vouch. I've fallen into that before, where I'll do a closing argument and I'll start talking about a client, and it's especially when you're in the heat of the battle, you've got somebody's life in your hands. And you tend to want to protect them, no matter, even if they're abhorrent, even if they're somebody who the world hates. I mean, I've told Adam, I can't tell you how many times I've represented the most hated person in America, and even when you get to know them, nobody is really as bad as their worst day, in my humble opinion, with some exceptions, which I will not mention. But there is a humanity to doing defense work, and you tend to want to embrace and want to protect somebody. But when everybody else, especially, is hurling invective at them, it's that's part of what you do. You don't do it to become popular. That's for sure.
Mark, I think we're saying, sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like with Michael Jackson, you can't help but feel like this is some abused kid who is passing on the abuse. So there is a part of you that's like, I'm sure that guy went through it in ways that we cannot imagine. But at the same time, you see that same look in his accuser's eyes, like they're damaged for life. And
I don't want to violate any business and professions code, so I'll just say hypothetically, I've been there before where you've looked at somebody, and that's why when people say, well, do you want to, are you going to destroy this witness? No, you don't want to destroy a witness, but there is a way to at least talk to a witness on cross where you have some empathy, and you got to remember, you've always got 12 people judging, and they're going to hate you if you take somebody apart to surgically dismantle them in a way that has no empathy. So I've seen it, and there is what you talk about is a cycle that is repeated that you often see. You see it in the domestic violence situations. I mean, it's without naming anybody that I've ever represented, it's amazing to me. And I've represented 3 generations of that: the grandfather, the father, and the grandson, of that domestic violence that kind of permeates by generation. It's awful.
Hey, Judd.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm so curious. When we were talking a couple of days ago, you were talking about a virtual cocktail party you were going to attend. Which I was immediately enamored with, and then my mind started racing. Who is on this cocktail conference call with the great Judd Apatow? I was picturing all the folks you've worked with in the past. Are there anybody?
My question is Jonah Hill on this, because
Jonah Hill.
I love Jonah, and I think you deserve credit for kind of vaulting Jonah into the cultural conversation. I give you a lot of credit for that.
Well, I was not having a cocktail with Jonah. It was with some writer director friends, and it was basically this with alcohol. And our friend said,
Adam and I have done that. So next time we do that, we're inviting you back, but we're going to send you over a bottle of either Mangria or Don Julio 1942.
Yeah, I haven't. That was the first that I have drank at this period in history. It was the first beer I've had through it, because I felt like I am just too on edge to add that element.
Have you been sober during the entire stay-at-home or shelter?
Yeah.
So have I. But mine's because of Lent, and I can't decide if I want to break next week or if I want to just keep riding it out sober. So it's a tough decision.
I'm trying to keep my my clarity, but I do have a question for you as someone who's in the justice system all the time, and it's, as we watch like Bill Barr and how our government works. When you spend your life at the center of it and really understanding the machinations and the personalities of it, does it give you hope, or do you feel like it is a dark, broken place?
I wrote a book 7 years ago called Mistrial, because it's a very dark, broken place, and it's a scary time we live in. I mean, the idea that I used to I used to feel like I believed kind of that originalist Supreme Court theory that we can sue for prosecutorial misconduct. We can sue when the police get out of hand. But all of qualified immunity has eaten that up. So there is no consequences anymore. And I can't tell you, there's a transcript floating around somewhere from 10 years ago where I lost my mind in a courtroom because I had a guy who was absolutely innocent. And I could not get the judge to do the right thing. And I out of frustration, I said, I want to just take an Uzi and break this kid out of custody because this is so frustrating. You people are just kind of just putting him into the maw of this machine, and it's awful. And so I would love to tell you that there's hope and that there's a way to change it. No, the system is completely irretrievably broken. It's the criminal justice system is a farce. And lawyers, criminal defense lawyers have been reduced to kind of window dressing. And if you are anybody who tries to hold them accountable, you're constantly being threatened with contempt or sanctions or this or that. I mean, there's no reward unless you are somebody who's representing corporate or large interest. There's no reward in the system for you. I mean, it's just.
Well,
it's
Adam,
awful.
I think I will drink for the rest of this time in history. That changed my whole approach to how I'm dealing with things.
Well,
and
I got to tell you, I don't know if you're doing edibles or you're vaping, but you talked about losing your edge. And it's like the booze takes the edge off. It rounds over all those sharp edges, Judd. So you may want to reconsider your relationship.
Judd, I'll tell you, I've got a case right now that Adam is, I've talked about it endlessly. Adam has made it a chapter in his new book where it was, I'm representing the widow and the orphans, the kids of Daniel Shaver, who was murdered by a cop in Mesa. Actually, the cop was acquitted of murder because the judge would not allow the jury to hear that, that engraved on his gun, on his automatic weapon was "You're fucked." And so I've been suing the police department for years. And it's just astonishing the lengths to which they will go to deprive this widow and her children of any kind of compensation, to the point where the fact that I was giving her money so she could live, so she wouldn't be homeless, they're threatening me that is a violation of my ethical duties, and that I could get disbarred for that. I mean, to that point, even though they're giving him the money to go declare bankruptcy and then hire him back, giving him a disability pension, the cop, and then letting him retire immediately. So when you see stuff like that, you want to just pull whatever remaining hair you've got out. You just say to yourself, how is this even possible that this could be America?
Well, I always think that's so tragic because when I talk to cops, like when we were shooting in New York, I talked to a lot of cops and you feel so bad for them. I was talking to this guy one night and he was just saying, my life is at risk every second of the day. Like everything I do is so dangerous. And yet, someone else makes a terrible mistake and then everybody I deal with hates me because of a mistake someone else made. But there doesn't seem to be a place in these departments for them to aggressively hold everyone accountable so that people aren't against cops in that way.
That's exactly, I've made this argument, I can't tell you how many times, and to juries, where, look, the problem is when ranks get closed. It shouldn't be ranks closing, as you say. It should be, no, we don't want to be tainted by this. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and defend somebody who steals from their clients. That would not be, that's not somebody I'm going to close ranks around. So for the same reason, a cop should not want a bad cop to be able to escape justice and to do stuff like retire after I'd given him a disability for life and then fund his bankruptcy. I mean, those kinds of things drive you crazy. And that's exactly why there shouldn't be this, what's proverbially called the thin blue line.
Well, there's something that drives Gargus nuts, and it's along these kind of lines. Although I don't think the Republicans are circling the wagons around these senators who got busted with some inside. Um, were they senators or Congress people? Anyway, there's the whole insider,
right?
the whole
The Georgia
insider trading
senator,
thing.
Burr. And by the way, finally, people, the thing that's interesting about that's something that you've started to see cuts across partisan lines. I mean, the idea that you're sitting in a briefing, an intelligence briefing, you can see what's going to happen because at the same time that you're telling or tweeting, everything's under control with coronavirus, yet you're selling millions of dollars worth of stock. Who's going to defend that?
Is it? But aren't they allowed to buy and sell stock? Like, aren't the laws really set up for them to not be accountable for using that information?
Yeah, especially when they say I got a blind trust. I love the blind trust.
Yeah.
What are the odds of a blind trust selling stocks that are going to tank the same day that there's that you get an intelligence briefing? You buy that?
Yeah. Well, also, I think something's happening in the country that people don't know much about, which is, years ago, my friend used to always say to me, do you know that Donald Trump doesn't have appointments? And this is in his book. He would talk about that he has no appointments. His day is just open. If you wanted to pitch Donald Trump something, you would just go to the lobby of Trump Tower and wait. And at some point, someone would go, okay, you can come upstairs. And you'd meet with him and some associate, that Allen guy or something. And Trump would listen. And based on his gut, because he doesn't look at information, he would just go oh, that sounds interesting. Allen, look into that. Or he would say, no. And he does that as the president. It's like executive time. His entire day is wide open because he has such learning disabilities that he can't even have a schedule. But as a result of that, what he does is he just sits around all day and all night, and he mainly is just running calls. So in addition to talking to Hannity and people like that, the owners of all the football teams and all these corporations, they just chat with him all the time. And what's happening is this massive insider trading because Trump so wants them to kiss his ass that he's always giving them information. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about, how we might have this malaria stuff. And then suddenly all those people are buying pharmaceutical stocks. And that's what they do. And it's everybody on both sides of the line. It's Democrats and Republican billionaires. They're just listening. And it's like when he was in the Oval Office with the Russians and he talked about Israel and he gave away all these secrets because he wants people to like him. And he may not even know he's feeding people insider trading information. But if you could get him on the phone, he would tell you what the next 10 days looks like.
Right. Well, and he would have that information.
I think we've learned that whether it's China or senators or Trump, everyone loves money. And people do the right thing when they think people are watching. But when they don't think people are watching, that's when the character kicks in.
That's exactly right. That's the test of character.
I know, for instance, today I gave $2,500 to a GoFund. Oh, sorry, I told you.
Hey, Judd, I want to get your take on this. The GoFundMe thing that Larry David started for caddies at the Riviera Country Club. Now look, I like Larry David. I think caddies need to eat. But my thing was Riviera Country Club is $300K to join. You probably don't live too far away, but I don't think of you as an avid golfer. I'm not.
I did not know how to play the game. I played once with Dennis Miller in the late 80s, and I walked in front of his line. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, hey, Jack Nicklaus, way to walk in front of my line. And he just humiliated me. And that was it. I never played again.
But Larry David started a GoFundMe page for caddies. And my thing is everybody who's in that country club, that's some of the richest people in California. And Larry gave $5,000. Why doesn't every member just give $5,000 to your caddies? I don't know why we need to open this up.
But there's a lot of that right now. I mean, for instance, I think yesterday Jeff Bezos gave $100 million to some charity.
Caddies?
I don't think it was just caddies.
Oh, the gal. Oh, the gals who drive the beer cart.
And then I think people were like, well, he is worth $120 billion. And you know,
it's only going to be more by the time this is over.
Yeah, because he's the one person that like everyone needs. And I think most people just go, could you live pretty well with $3.5 billion in the bank? Right? Like, could you get your life working?
What do you think? I think I could handle a bill. I could $1 billion. I think I could live well.
You remember when like Bill Gates was going to give like all his money away? And if you look every year, like how much money he has in the bank, he has so much more money than when he said he was giving all his money away, because due to the deductions and everything else, when you get to a certain level, they can't help but make more money. They don't know how to get rid of it fast enough.
Hey, Judd, let's turn the conversation to you for a moment or two, because you're talking about playing golf with Dennis Miller in the 80s. That was a long time ago. I've always been fascinated by your focus on comedy. I know famously you interviewed a lot of comedians when they would come into town as a teenager. This focus and this, I'm also always envious of people who know what they want to do when they're 14. Yes. I'm so envious of it, but you always knew that. And I guess the question is like nature or nurture. Like, was it just always in you? And tell us about interviewing these famous comedians when you were 15.
Well, you know, when I was a kid, my grandfather was a jazz producer. He produced like Dinah Washington and Sarah Vaughan, and he produced the first Janis Joplin album. So he was a real hustler. He was like one of these Ahmet Ertegun type guys for like hardcore jazz and blues. And I was always impressed by him as a little kid. I knew that he was a badass. He used to go down south in like the 40s and record blues artists on their front porches. You know, he was just a poor kid from the Bronx who loved jazz, worked at an airplane plant, and then would take the money and then just go hire like Charlie Parker to do a session in the earliest days of jazz, right? So there was an entrepreneurial spirit in the family. And then my grandmother was friends with this comedian, Toady Fields, who was, you know,
Toady Fields was great.
She was like a Joan Rivers type. She sang. And so she was around a little bit. And I'd go see her at the Westbury Music Fair on Long Island. And I remember I went to see her. She had diabetes. She had her leg amputated. And she did a comeback tour. And they drove her on a golf cart to the stage. She sits on a stool. She's got one leg, like a fake leg. And she tore the house down. Like, she killed so hard talking about having one leg. I think as a little kid, I just thought, well, that's the best thing ever, that you could be this odd woman with one leg and people adore you and you can entertain them. You could turn that into a positive even. So I always wanted to do it. And then my mom, when my parents got divorced, got a job at a comedy club. I mean, she was so broke, she took a job seating people at a comedy club in the Hamptons. And so when I was like 14, I would go every weekend to see.
What was the name of the club?
Well, it was called East End Comedy Club, but there was a club in Huntington called East Side Comedy Club, which was one of the first clubs in the country. And that's where Eddie Murphy started and people like Bob Nelson and Rosie O'Donnell. And I would go and watch all the comedians. And I thought, I gotta find a way to talk to them. Like, I don't want to just watch their show. I want to ask them how they do it. So I created a radio show for my high school radio station where I would just go talk to people. This is 1983, 84. But I talked to Leno and Seinfeld and John Candy and Howard Stern. But it was just like this maniacal need to go, how do you do it? Because I just wanted to do it. And I probably wanted to do it just as like a neurotic, weird kid looking to escape. You know, I got to get out of here. How am I going to get out of here? Oh, I guess maybe Harold Ramis can explain how to get out of here.
Well, you know, it's so funny because if you talk to guys like Brian Grazer and Judd and whomever, it's like the one through line they all have is a motor, and they don't even know where the motor's propelling them. They just know that it's propelling them. Yeah. And, you know, Grazer will tell the same kinds of stories, like just getting into offices, talking to people, waiting for him outside. Like the stuff is a little borderline, you could get a restraining order or two. And it is kind of interesting that almost all the positives in life are right up against the red line of being too much. Like, when you hear about like Michael Jordan would stay in the gym 2 hours after practice and do 1,000 free throws. And you go, all right, that's good. And then a little bit past that, and you need to be incarcerated. Like all the greats get right up to the red line of should be incarcerated or should be euthanized or should be medicated or should be something, and they know where to stop.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy. And you have this like arrogance of youth. I think that, it's like genetic. Like you have to believe that your dreams are possible. Like when I lived with Adam Sandler when we were kids, we had an apartment together. Like none of us thought there was any scenario where he wouldn't become what he has become. And there was no proof of it, by the way. There was nothing that like
there was nothing. There was no way to predict it or anything else, but you just believed it.
Yeah, I mean, there was no thought like this guy would one day be able to do Uncut Gems.
Right.
It was just like our knucklehead friend that made us laugh, and he believed in himself, and we were like, I think this guy's going to be the next Eddie Murphy, and we didn't question it for a second. We just thought, I wonder how it'll happen. It's got to happen. And I think you have to be that deluded to make it.
There's a certain amount of delusion that in order to rise to whatever level you want to rise to, you literally cannot believe in limits or certain kinds of you just can't.
I learned this. I learned this lesson because when I was doing the Man Show with Kimmel many years ago, somewhere season 3, season 4, the show was an incredible success, and they were interviewing us on like Dateline or like one of these nighttime CBS shows about Man Show and the success of Man Show, and we were just sitting there on stools on the stage, and the interviewer said, did you ever think that you would be this big at this young age and so on and so forth? And I said, no, I didn't think I'd be doing this at this age. And Jimmy just looked there and said, I'm surprised it took so long. And he was like 29 and a half. You know what I mean?
Right. It's like, I can't believe I've waited this long for this, for what I
made the jacket. For. I had the Letterman jacket.
That's
I made
right.
myself.
No, and I realized he meant it. He meant it in a good way. And probably Sandler probably feels the same way. And it takes a combination of that and talent to get to the level those guys are at.
Well, I remember Bob Dylan was on 60 Minutes. I think it was Ed Bradley was interviewing him.
Ed Bradley was interviewing him. I remember that.
And he has this quote, I don't know it exactly, but he basically said that he always knew that all of this was going to happen from the time he was really little. He goes, but you can't tell anybody or they'll destroy it. And I'm paraphrasing, but that is true. But I think the problem is that there's a lot of people think that, but maybe they aren't built or haven't had the life that leads to that kind of talent, and that's what's hard about show business. So there's a lot of people, they think they're Bob Dylan, but there's only one Bob Dylan. And so it's tricky, but I always tell people, if you want to be a writer or something, just know everybody quits. Almost everyone who says they're going to do it quits. Almost everyone who wants to be an actress or an actor quits. So just by not quitting, you have a much better shot, because you watch, if you go to acting school in 5 years, 3 out of the 50 people in your class are still even trying to be in the business.
That's exactly right.
The attrition rate is amazing. Judd, for you, I was doing a lot of stand-up before the stay-at-home order took place, and probably was one of the last people to do stand-up all the way till the end at the Laugh Factory. Just what was really like 3 or 4 weeks ago. It wasn't that long ago. I know you've done stand-up, you've done stand-up specials, you've hit it hard, and then you've backed off for periods when you're working on other projects. Were you actively doing sets when this sequestration thing went down? And then if so, what does that do to your game?
Well, yeah, I had just did like my last set. I did the Comedy Store, and I did a Largo benefit show not that long ago. And, you know, we tried to do a benefit at Largo like once a month with comedians and a musician. And we had some great ones. Beck did one recently. It was incredible. And you know, we do things with Jackson Brown every year. And so, but for me, stopping, I can get thrown, like when the world changes dramatically, you know, as just a comedy person, I get confused as to what the comedic angle to anything is, or if we even need humor at all. You know, sometimes just for myself, I think I have nothing to contribute comedically to this moment. And other people do. I'll watch people and be like, wow, they have found a way to be funny, and I have not. And so I'm going to not attempt it at this moment, because I don't think I have anything to say.
You're not in the right frame of mind. I've got some friends who send me memes that crack me up. So I get it.
I mean, I think I feel like two things at the same time. One is, I think it's very good for people to be entertained and distracted. And I think that there's something that the country is doing, which is really positive and incredible, which is we're all saying we're going to make this massive sacrifice to help what's primarily a specific group of people. And that it's like an amazing, loving gesture for us all to do that. And I think it's good for people to try to entertain everybody while they're making the sacrifice. But at the same time, I'm all terrified of the politics of it and how choices are being made. And I'm in, you know, such a state from tracking it that I know I'm not the amusing person that you need right now. I'd rather watch the cast of a Broadway show sing some songs than to see what I would say.
Did you know Adam Schlesinger from Fountains of Wayne?
I did not, but I know a lot of people who are very, very close to him, and it's a massive tragedy.
Yeah, I worked with him a little bit on the Man Show doing a bit, and he wrote the theme to
Didn't he
Crank
write the
Yankers.
theme song for that's what I
For
thought.
Crank Yankers. Yeah, so he was just really talented guy who just was totally diversified. Like his portfolio was insane. He'd do Broadway musicals, he'd write pop songs for TV shows, he'd write themes for TV shows. Like you gotta be diverse. And so I figured, since he was a New York guy and you spent some time over there and with the creative field, you might know him. I think everyone either knew him or didn't know him and respected the shit out of him. So Judd, last question for you. What are you thinking about for your career? And I mean that in a way that, like, are you thinking you want to do a straight through serious film? I know you love doing movies that really examine the human condition. And I guess at the beginning of your career, like anybody, you're fixated on comedy because you feel like, I'm not secure enough not to make people laugh constantly. Kind of a Woody Allen thing. But at some point, Woody Allen does Crimes and Misdemeanors and movies like that are like important. I mean, movies. I love movies like Love and Death, like a Woody Allen Love and Death, funniest, you know, joke for joke movie, great, wall to wall. But in the big picture, Crimes and Misdemeanors is an important movie, and Love and Death is a funny movie. So are you in that trajectory, being a super thoughtful guy, and now giving up on comedy altogether because of coronavirus and booze?
That's my fucking fun
at all.
That's my gift to you.
Right, and seeing Adam Sandler do Uncut, so there you go.
Yeah.
So, you know, I like Garagos because he likes to laugh and get drunk. So we'll be spending more time together. But what do you think? Are you thinking about this, and there's some thoughts on this subject?
Well, you know, I love when movies can be funny and emotional and dramatic. You know, I'm always thinking, you know, how can you tie it all together? I remember I loved Diner when I was a kid. That was a really inspirational movie for me. And of course, you know, Terms of Endearment, movies like that.
Defending Your Life is a great example.
Oh yeah, and Timeless, and holds them so well. So, you know, the last movie I made, I literally finished right as this started. I made a movie that I wrote with Pete Davidson and Dave Cyrus called The King of Staten Island. We were literally going to premiere it the week after this all shut down.
No kidding.
And in real life, Pete Davidson's father was a fireman who we lost on 9/11. And we wrote a fictional movie about the effect that had on his family. In the movie, it's not 9/11, he's just a fireman. But so I have been thinking about first responders and the sacrifices they're willing to make for the last few years in talking with Pete and meeting all these firemen. And that's what our movie is about. It is about the aftermath of it and how a family is trying to heal even many years later. And I think it came out really well. And it's about heroes, and what does it mean to be willing to do that? And now I watch TV every day, and it's thousands of doctors and nurses who are walking into a very precarious, dangerous situation because they want to help people and they're willing to take that risk. And I think that there's a way to talk about that that's very human. And that doesn't mean it can't also be funny and warm in addition to being emotional. And that's the kind of work I always try to do. I'm trying to thread that needle. And as I get older, I like to talk about things that have some significance. But then every once in a while, you just want to do something.
You want to
really
laugh every once in a while. Right.
Yeah, I was watching Walk Hard was on, which I wrote many years ago with Jake Gaz, and I was just laughing just how silly it was. I mean, it adds nothing to the culture except you might get a break and laugh for a while. So hopefully I'll do more of both.
Well, when you want to premiere that and all this is over, I'm sitting here in the Engine Company 28 building, and
wow.
So we're huge into firefighters and firemen. So
well, they're so incredible.
Who doesn't like a fireman, right?
I mean, we're sitting there shooting in a firehouse in Staten Island, and we have our cast is half real firemen and half actors. We have Steve Buscemi plays one of the firemen. Wow. He was a fireman in New York.
That's right.
But while we're shooting, the bell would go off, and then the real firemen would suddenly jump in those trucks and just run off. And it's very intense and impressive. And when you talk to them, they have a look in their eyes like, I'd run in that building for you. And it's very, very inspiring. And as we know in show business, not a lot of people running into buildings for people. We live in a world with a lot of people with big egos trying to make a lot of money, trying to to get everyone to love them. And it really, it changed me to spend time with people whose entire life is service every minute of the day. And
I have a suggestion, and Mark, you can probably broker this. So Chris Morgan, who does all the Fast and Furious movies, he's a neighbor of ours.
Right.
And I don't know if you're aware of that, Mark. I think you are.
I am.
He pretty much just lives right in between the two of us,
Right.
And he knows I go nuts for those Fast and Furious movies because I'm an intellectual heavyweight.
Right.
So his Fast 9 or 10 was supposed to open in like May and got kicked back a whole year. Yeah. And Judd's got a great movie that's in the can as well, The King of Staten Island. Mm-hmm. Now, look, obviously these movies are done. They're viewable. Yeah. I'm cooped up like a fucking veal in my house. There's nothing I would love more than the main entree of Fast and Furious. I'm sitting in my home theater as we speak with a dessert liqueur of The King of Staten Island to cleanse my palate. Now, obviously I could bootleg this shit, but Mark, if you drew up the proper paperwork, NDA, whatever it is, don't do reams of paper, but a simple agreement.
We'll do a simple NDA. I'll make
a simple NDA that I could get Judd's movie over to my home theater. Morgan's just fucking, he's over at his place all cooped up.
He's between Brady and Phil. He's a walk, right? We can do it.
Or if Morgan doesn't agree to do that, we sue his ass because they started showing commercials for Fast and Furious with Vin Diesel driving a fucking Mopar. I've seen those commercials. You can't walk that shit back. What about the pain and the suffering? You know what I mean? I'm unable to concentrate. I don't like driving anymore.
We've got Fast and Furious blue balls.
Yes, yeah. So now I'm not going to threaten to sue him first. First, we're going to reach out with the olive.
You'll try to do it the charming way, your usual Carolla charm.
Right, but I need you standing behind me with a briefcase in case this shit goes down.
I'm gonna chop mine up and put it on Quip.
Wait,
and
here, Adam, I'll do this.
Briefcase?
I'll stand behind.
Oh God, with your gavel, with your crystal gavel.
With my crystal gavel, exactly.
That looks like something way dirtier than a crystal gavel.
I don't know why. I'm somehow ruined that everything that's made out of lucite looks like it goes up your ass now for me.
We all have way too much time on our hands to just amuse ourselves.
Boy, all right, I'll tell you,
Judd. I'll let you go so you don't have to hang around and listen to me.
Judd,
read
it was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. I really enjoy this podcast. It's great, and keep it up. Everyone, be well, be healthy, and I'm here if you need me. If you call at like midnight after a day of exercising and working out, I'm usually eating half a cake at midnight at the end of every day.
As am I. We'll have a spin-off of the podcast. It'll be cake at a 0.20 at midnight.
Yes, excellent. All right,
thanks,
take care,
Judd.
guys.
Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it. We'll talk to you soon. Well, I told you, Mark. I told you he was a big fan of yours. I told you he loves.
It's a mutual admiration society. Thank you. You made the month.
All right. Well, let me tell you before we leave about Oracle by NetSuite. What do companies like Ring and Hint and Tecovas have in common? Well, I'll tell you what, they have all experienced amazing growth with NetSuite. If you want to take your company from 2 million to 10 million or 10 million to 100 million, how about you go with NetSuite by Oracle? Gives you the tools and turbocharges your growth. Get a full picture of your business, finance, inventory, HR, customers, and more. Run your entire business from anywhere, even if you're working from home, as we all are now. NetSuite customers grow faster than the S&P 500. Not too shabby. World's #1 cloud-based business system, trusted by 20,000 plus companies. NetSuite, business grows here. Right, Gary?
That's absolutely right. Schedule your free product tour right now and get your free guide, 6 ways to run a more profitable business at netsuite.com/doubt. That's netsuite.com/DOUBT, netsuite.com/doubt.
Well, that was a treat, right, Mark?
Boy, you're not kidding. Thank you, Adam. That was great. Thanks, Gary.
Well, he got hold of me and he was talking about the show. So I immediately just said, so
you immediately tried to divert him over to ACS, right?
I did. And then I realized that was a non-starter. No, he's been on before. He's a dear guy, as you can tell, but I knew he's a big Mark Garagos fan. So I figured, well, instead of talking about Mark, why don't we talk to Mark? So thank you, with an assist from Gary Smith, for the wonderful production. All right, you can go to adamcarolla.com and find out everything you need to know about live shows coming up, theoretically, in the not too distant future. New book, I'm Your Emotional Support Animal. You can pre-order it now at Amazon. Click us, bookmark us, click on through. And Chassis has all the movies on Blu-ray, CHASSY. Mark, any businesses that are still rolling and sending food out?
Only Engine Company 28, 213-624-6996. Call and we deliver. Thank you.
Thank you. Until next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Garagos saying mahalo.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode. This is Carolla Digital.